Hello, I'm Kathy Grady, and we're here at the Long Meadow Adult Center for another episode of Living History. Today we have with us, we're so glad to have with us, Linda Abrams, who is the curator for Storrs House and was born in Long Meadow. So she's been here a long time, and we're going to talk about growing up, but especially about the 50s, what was going on in the 50s that started the changed Long Meadow from a village to a town. So thanks for coming today, Linda. That's great.
Interesting, a village to a town. And
don't you think?
Yeah, well, we always thought of it as a town. You know, it was a town, but it was small, 4,000 population in the 40s.
Yeah.
Everyone knew everyone. It was a peaceful town. And when there was an event in town, everyone came. At least, I think everyone came. The first event I remember is when the remains of Edward Wilkins returned to Long Meadow. He'd been killed in World War II. He's buried in our cemetery. He's a Medal of Honor winner. And it was a huge, huge event. Omar Bradley was the guest speaker.
Oh, wow. In Long Meadow.
Right on the green. It was the first big thing I remember on the green. We also used to gather on the green when they lit the Christmas tree.
Oh, yeah.
And sing songs. And this year, for the first time, they did that. They gathered around the tree again and sang songs. And that was an annual event on the green. We never had Long Meadow Days or anything like that. So when Edward Wilkins came home, that's what I remember as the first big event on the green. And I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I was a kid, but everyone went. We all went. We learned to ski in Long Meadow.
Oh, yes. Talk about that.
On the hill,
so
and I
skiing. I always think of Long Meadow as so flat.
I know. I drive by that all the time, and it's interesting how growth of trees come back. It was a hill right by Wheel Meadow Road down to the brook, and they had a rope
where Bay
tow.
Path is now.
Yeah, where Bay Path.
It's that dingle.
So it was called Ely Hill because the Elys owned the property on the south side. So everyone came, they had a rope tow, and it was run by, I think, an engine from a Model T Ford that ran the rope tow. And there were only a couple of trees. I did manage to hit one of them once. But it was no trees except maybe a couple of big ones. And now you look at that hill and it's totally wooded.
Yes.
But we skied right here. That's where I learned to ski, right here in Long Meadow.
So I've looked at that since you told me that, and it's very steep.
Right.
And it seems like you'd be down it in a minute and a half.
Well, right.
Okay.
Yeah, to the brook at the bottom.
Yeah.
And then that rope tow.
You grabbed the toe.
Pulled us back up again. The same with ice skating. We either ice skated in the meadows or...
The meadows froze?
Oh, all those ponds, they all froze over. Or we skated in Stropel Field off William Street, and there was this huge Quonset hut, and they had a fire going in the Quonset hut, so we'd go in there to warm up.
So Stropel Field, which we still have behind the library, which is now dry, was wet.
They would flood it. I have no idea how they did it. I just know that's where we would skate. Because we couldn't skate on Porter Lake until the Springfield plows could actually drive on it and plow the snow off. You know, other than January this year, it just seems to me when I was a kid that we had a lot more snow.
Oh, yeah. Well, we fixed that this year, right?
I mean, we seemed to do so much skating and sliding
now,
and
you
skiing.
lived around the green, or?
I lived on Longview Drive.
Oh, yeah, so it's just a little down, yeah.
And I went to Center School. And
Elementary.
Center School Elementary, and then the junior high right next door.
Right there, yeah.
In Long Meadow High School. In fact, our class was the first one to go K to 12 in Long Meadow, graduating from Long Meadow High School. We were the first. There was a class ahead of us, but they had to do a year in Springfield before the high school opened. So we never got tainted with Springfield. We did K to 12.
Tainted? I beg your
know.
pardon. So you went straight through, and you were the first all
K
Long
to
Meadow
12.
class to graduate.
And, you know, it's interesting because some of my friends that I graduated with, I was with from kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same
Like
kids.
how many people are in your graduating class?
In my graduating class, there were 81. When we were in center school, we only had one kindergarten, first grade, second grade, right? It wasn't until sixth grade that more kids had moved in to town, because it was the only junior high, that they really had to go to
Well,
sixth
there was
grades.
Center School wasn't the only feeder school for the junior high. You had Norway, and you had Converse,
Right.
And so they're all feeding into the junior high.
Except sixth grade, we were still,
you're still
in the elementary school.
Oh,
But enough people had, because they started developing, you know, after World War II, houses got built.
baby boom, yeah.
Yeah, more houses
House
got built.
boom.
And suddenly, and people moved in. So
How
suddenly,
many kids were in your class? You know, like in a classroom?
in elementary school,
Yeah,
25, 30.
yeah.
But we all behaved. Of course, Miss Hicks was the principal,
You did?
and you had to behave.
Oh,
You know, we all sat in the little desks, and it was so funny because my name was Swanson, and everything was alphabetical, so it was cool because I was always near the back, so I was not necessarily called on. And then I get married, and I'm an Abrams, and now all of a sudden I'm first, and anytime they do alphabetical. But it was just a wonderful, idyllic time. I mean, it was idyllic. Even though, you know, when I was a young teenager, the Korea War was going on, but we didn't feel as though there was this huge threat.
right.
The biggest threat was when the polio, and when they came out with that polio vaccine, and the long line of us at center school to get our shots. You know,
But before that, were you kept from swimming in certain pools and everything?
well, we swam
remember
at the
that.
pump, and I got pink eye. Everybody got pink eye every summer. We
But
swam
not
at the
polio,
pump.
but that was the
Yeah,
fear.
I knew no one that ever got polio. I mean, we'd heard about iron lungs and that, but if anyone did, I didn't know about it. So, but we all got the vaccine. But yeah, we swam in the pump. You know, that was
Where was that?
behind St. Andrews. You know, where Laurel Pond is.
Oh, yes.
You can walk in there now, and if you walked in with me,
Ah, that's good.
I could show you, you know, where we all swam. And we had a big powwow at the end of summer where everyone got their graduation from being a tadpole to being the next thing and the next thing, and finally a swimmer, and then advanced swimmer, and then junior life saving. You know, we all got a big thing. And that Indian group from Springfield College would come
Oh, yes.
and do all the Indian. You know, it was called a powwow. It was a big event we look forward to at the end of every summer.
So
When
it was
we
like
were
a
writing
camp, but
our-
it wasn't a camp.
It wasn't a camp. No, it wasn't a camp. There weren't any camps in town that I remember. There were activities at Bliss Road Playground. There were activities there in the building that used to be there.
And there were the clay courts.
We had a tennis tournament run by the priest from St. Mary's,
Uh-huh.
the St. Mary's tennis tournament. And
At those clay courts, which are
at those
not-
wonderful clay courts.
And,
There was a tennis house right there, which is gone. And yeah, we did the tennis tournament every year.
and you had a horse.
There were 2 places in Long Meadow where you could have horses. There was this fabulous farm. I wish I could remember that woman's name. Excuse me, on Converse Street, just past Burbank Road.
Oh, way out, yeah.
Okay. And if you went out Converse, just past Burbank, and you looked over to the right, there was this enormous farm with these yellow, if I remember, they were sort of yellow buildings. Someone else could remember from that end of town. But horses were boarded there. Then at the bottom of Meadow Road, this is before Route 91, at the bottom of Meadow Road, there was another stables where horses were boarded. So I had a horse boarded there. Friends of mine had a horse boarded at Converse Street. And sometimes we would ride and meet each other and ride through all those sand hills that were taken down for Route 91.
Wait a minute, before we get to the sandhills, so would you ride your horse up Long Meadow Street?
Sure. Yeah, or down Mill Road. It would just depend. But you know, it's funny. Even though there was no Route 91, so Route 5 was the major north-south, because I made a lot of money selling lemonade on Route 5. I mean, think about it.
People just pull over on
Oh, yeah,
the
think
major
about it.
throughway from...
Think about no Route 91. Like every once in a while when there's...
I've heard some people complain about the noise and the traffic that was on Long Meadow Street. No, you were selling lemonade.
I made a killing. And it's funny, another thing I used to do, being an only child and the things that you like to do, I would sit at the end of my street, Longview Drive, at Long Meadow Street, and keep lists of the vehicles, like a DeSoto or a Dodge or a Hudson.
Why?
You know, I don't know.
Oh.
I just kept lists.
You were a researcher even then.
And it was so simple then. You didn't have that many cars. And they all had
And
emblems.
they looked different. They used to look more
They
different.
looked very different. I could spot a Ford or a Chevy or a Plymouth, you know. And I'd make a check mark on my list.
All right, so you used to ride your horse in the sandhills. Tell me where the sandhills were.
Well, if you look east from Laurel in Williams, there were only a couple of houses. I can even show you the houses that were there. Otherwise, there was nothing. It was just sand, and they were sand hills. They were hills. It was like pine barrens. You know, it was just, that's why people have so much trouble with lawns that live in that area, because it's all sand. And so there were no houses, if you could imagine.
Were the blueberries there? A lot of people talk about the blueberries.
There were blueberries, brambles, and sumac. So when you got to the intersection of Laurel and Williams, other than a couple of houses, the next thing was where that point of land is, where today there's a gas station.
And what we now call the center of town.
A Dunkin' Donuts.
It was the edge of town, right?
There was an Atlantic gas station there.
Oh, there was way out there.
An Atlantic gas station. So you drove that whole distance where all those streets and grassy gutter and the high school and all of that, and there was nothing.
And Captain Road, Viscount.
All that.
All that. Nothing.
None of that.
Sand.
Just sand and hills and trails, and there was nothing. There was nothing. There was nothing.
Why do you have a gas station in the middle of nowhere? Well, I suppose that's off the point.
Yeah, I don't know. It was an Atlanta gas station. I remember the logo because we had cousins that lived in East Long Meadow, so we would go that way to go see cousins. And there would be that gas station right there, that Atlantic, but nothing. No Friendlies there, because our Friendlies, of course, was
on Bliss Road.
Oh, yeah. That was our Friendlies.
Bliss and Long Meadow.
I used to go in there with my dog. Can you imagine? And I'd order a hamburger and give half to my dog, who would be right there with me. The same with Woody's, where the spa is on Long Meadow
Wood
Street.
And steel, or
That was wood and steel.
you called it Woody's?
Called it Woody's. And I would go in there with my dog, and the butcher in the back would always give him a bone. And he'd go sit back up, push the door open, sit outside, wait for me. I'd be buying penny candy.
Right, we went for the candy, but it was also a grocery store.
It was. It's funny, you look at it and it's not that big, but when you first walked in the door, and people who lived here, they'll tell you that, the candy counter, the penny candy, was right there, right on the right. The butcher shop was in the back, and the canned goods, where you always had to look at them because they would be expanded, which meant it was bad